Okay, so here we have a paper model of the larynx, and we'll start right here on the lateral side with the CT, or the cricothyroid muscles, which are located between the thyroid cartilage and then the angle of the cricoid cartilage. And when the CT contracts, it pulls the thyroid cartilage downward and anteriorly, which then elongates and stretches the TA muscles. So that elongation and that stretching causes a tension, which then can cause a change in the pitch. There are two major adductor muscles of the larynx. The first is the interarytenoid muscles, and then the second is the lateral cricoarytenoid muscles over here, or the LCA. So the IA muscles, which are here, are located on the posterior surface of the arytenoids. There are two parts to the IA muscles. The first is the oblique IA, which are attached from the base of one arytenoid to the apex of the other, which creates this X shape that we see. The second part is the transverse IA. It runs horizontally, so right here, kind of behind the oblique interarytenoid. So it runs horizontally across the posterior portions of the two arytenoids. And when the eye muscle contracts, it brings the arytenoids together and closes the vocal folds. So it would bring these together and close like that. And so the eye is also a medial compressor, so they close the posterior portion of the glottis. The second adductor is the LCA. The LCA connects the muscular processes of the arytenoids and then to the lateral border of the cricoid. So when the LCA contracts, the muscular processes are rotated anteriorly, which brings the vocal processes to the midline and then close the vocal folds. So again, kind of just bringing that together. There is one major adductor muscle, which is the posterior cricoarytenoid, or the PCA. The PCA originates on the posterior aspect of the cricoid cartilage and inserts into the muscular processes of the arytenoid cartilages. So when the PCA contracts, the muscular processes are rotated posteriorly, which pulls the vocal processes and the vocal folds away from each other and opens the glottis. So again, these would they would contract and it would pull the vocal folds away. Pull them away. And then lastly, we have the TA muscles. It forms the main mass of the vocal folds, and it has two parts. So the first part is the thyrovocalis, and the thyrovocalis is the medial portion of the TA, and it runs from the anterior commissure of the vocal process, and when it contracts, the pitch goes up. The second part is the thyromuscularis. So the thyromuscularis is it's the lateral portion of the TA, and it runs from the anterior commissure to the muscular process. And when it contracts, it pulls the arytenoids anteriorly, and then pitch goes down. So the TA can also increase the rate of vocal fold vibration by stiffening the vocal folds. And all of this works together to help complete the phonatory process according to the myoelastic aerodynamic theory of phonation. So in the phonatory process, to initiate vocal fold vibration, the vocal folds has to adduct to close the glottis, which is done by contracting the I and the LCA muscles, as we talked about before. And they exert a force called medial compression. And then that subglottal pressure builds up, and when the subglottal pressure is strong enough, it forces the vocal folds apart. The vocal folds begin to recoil back to the midline due to their natural elasticity. The air passing through the constriction formed by the closing glottis becomes negative in pressure due to the effect of the Bernoulli principle, which it means the greater the velocity, the lower the pressure. And then the negative pressure builds between the vocal folds, which further helps to close them completely, and then the whole process repeats itself for vocal fold vibration.